talk to a corpse? It's boring.
An American Werewolf in London could quite possibly be my favorite horror movie of all time. Even though I'm not necessarily or usually a big werewolf guy. It's definitely top 5. I used to have a list of my top 5 movies and I lost them. And every time I think of my list, whenever I think of top 5, I always forget some. I'm always like, shit, what about Reanimator? Oh, what about, so I don't have one. I'll break one down. Maybe I'll do a video about my top 5 horror movies, even though I might have already, well, I haven't done them yet, I know that, but they're going to be long format. American Werewolf in London. Directed by John Landis, who, he kind of went the opposite route of old Bob Clark, who directed Black Christmas, and then went on to direct funny movies like A Christmas Story. He started out with Kentucky Fried Movie, and then he did Animal House, and then he did Blues Brothers, I'm pretty sure was before American Werewolf in London. They did American Werewolf in London, and it's one of the best horror movies ever made. It's definitely the best werewolf movie ever made. And if you like The Howling, that one's good too. I love Joe Dante. He's one of my favorites. He made The Burbs. Starts out, we meet Jack and David. They're a couple of college kids, or they're getting ready to go to college. But first they're on a backpacking adventure they're gonna hike from England to Italy. Which is kind of funny because I was watching this movie and like nowadays, like compared to like today's standard, I watch them, it's like they're just out because they get dropped off by this like sheep herder, whatever he is. They're in a pickup full of sheep and they get dropped off and he's like, well, all right, that's as far that way as I'm going, so you guys go ahead and you'll just stay on the road. He points that out kind of nonchalantly. And so they start walking, but you look around them and there's just nothing. It's just like, it's just land and hills and flat land. And, you know, they're out there, they got backpacks. That's it. There's no cell phone. I don't even think they have food on them. I don't know how they're going to eat. So they walk for a while and they get to this place called the Slaughtered Lamb. I think it started raining at that point, so they go inside to duck in. Everybody just looks at them. At first they don't really care about them, but everybody there is weird. They just kind of act weird. They're kind of doing their own thing. And all they serve is alcohol. And they have food, but they don't, the lady doesn't want to make it or whatever. So they're looking around, and it's kind of weird. And it's weird because Jack seems to have like this uncanny knowledge of like werewolves and the occult. And he notices the star on the wall with the 5-pointed star, which pretty standard, but he calls it a pentangle. It's kind of like a pentagram, except there's no circle around it. And so everybody's doing their own thing, and finally Jack goes, hey, because the star also looks like it's like made from blood. I think it's just red and sloppy. And he's all, so hey, what's up with that star on the wall? And everybody just stops. And I was like, oh, and they get uncomfortable, and David's like, all right, it's time to go. Because David's like he's like the kind of, you know, straight edge, narrow path guy, like no nonsense, just kind of, and Jack's kind of like the goofy, you know, I mean, like David's like the Chuck D, Jack's the Flavor Flav. He's just kind of like, hey, what's going on over there? What's going on? Even though he has more of the knowledge of the occult and what kind of danger they could be in. It's like, well, this is weird, Slaughtered Lamb. That's a weird name for a place. Whoa, there's a pentagram on the wall. That's weird. And David's just kind of like, no, everything's cool. Everything's normal. He's just he's that guy. So David's like, all right, we better be getting out of here, because they didn't feel that comfortable in the first place. And so they'd start to leave, and the patrons are kind of like, good, get out of here. But they're like, stay on the road. And once again, we're hearing that advice, stay on the road. They're all, and beware the moon. They're like, okay. So they're walking. You can hear the thunder going outside. They get outside, it's raining. and they're walking, and I don't know how long they're walking, because they get a considerable distance from the slaughtered lamb, because they start hearing the sound of a wolf howling, and they're like, what should we do? And they're like, I think we need to go back to the slaughtered lamb. So they turn around like they're gonna go back, and they can't figure out which way it is. So they're walking, and then they notice that whatever's howling out there is now circling them, and they're like trying to get away from it. 1 minute's behind them, now it's in front of them, and then they walk, and David falls, and he looks up, and they both start laughing because it scared him. Like, it scared the shit out of him when he fell, and he's like, "Oh, will you help me up?" And when Jack goes to help him up, werewolf is on him. He's on the ground getting eaten. David's like, "I'm out of here." He just takes off. But after like maybe 20 feet or so, he's like, "What am I can't just leave. That's my best friend." So he turns around to go get him, and it's too late. You know, the wolf is not on him anymore. Jack is clearly dead. So he looks around, and he's gonna run for it, and the wolf jumps on him. But right as the wolf jumps on him, you hear gunshots, and the wolf goes flying to the ground, and it's the patrons from the bar. Because the patrons from the bar know all along about the werewolves in the area. And so they came out and saved the day. A little too late, though. The next morning, David wakes up in the hospital. And eventually you find out he's been in the hospital for like 3 weeks or so. And they're kind of cluing him in on, the doctor kind of clues him in on what's going on in terms of like, you know, Jack's dead. You guys were attacked by a madman. You know, a crazy person came out, and David's kind of like, well, that doesn't add up to what I remember. It wasn't a person. It was because when they shot the werewolf turned back into a man, so that the story could be it was just a man. It was just a naked crazy person. So he's explained it to David, and David's like, you know, even though he's been in like a coma or whatever for 3 weeks, he's explaining it's like that was not a man. I clearly remember an animal coming after us. I remember the sounds it made before it got us. Just seeing it come at us, killing him, and then jumping straight at me before it got killed. And then we meet the hot little nurse, Alex Price, who takes care of him. And he just kind of sits in there in denial. He doesn't know what's real and what's not. After dinner that night, David goes to sleep. And he has the dream. He's at home with his family. And I don't know. Part of me thinks that the reason behind this dream, him having this vivid dream, is just to kind of introduce us to his family, because there's no other way to put them in the movie. Because they don't ever come. Like, spoiler alert, he doesn't make it back home, and they don't come out to visit him. So it's showing that he has a family. It's showing, you know, it's humanizing him in that way, where there's his family back there, even though it's a weird dream, because in the dream, these mutant Nazi creatures come out with guns and start, well, they kill his whole family. And then he wakes up, and he's like, oh, geez. Because they're like, whoa, what a vivid nightmare. And Alex is next to him while he's sleeping, and she's like, whoa, is everything okay? He's like, oh, I just had the weirdest dream. She goes, well, I know it'll make you feel better. And she gets up and walks over and opens the curtains, and there's another mutant Nazi in there that shoots her. So then he wakes up again, and he's like, geez, and he's in the room alone. And the orderly comes in with some food that just didn't look good, like porridge. But the orderly drops it off and leaves. And then Jack walks in. Only Jack is clearly dead. Jack pays him a visit, and he's like, oh man, because he just had a really bad dream. Then he woke up from that dream to another bad dream. Now he's waking up. Is this a third bad dream? Jack explains that he's not dead. He's in limbo. And until the bloodline of the werewolf is severed and ended, he has to roam the earth waiting. And at this point, David is the last werewolf. It's kind of like in vampire movies where you have to kill the final vampire. So it's kind of like that, which is kind of interesting, because I think this is the only werewolf movie that really pulls that angle. I don't know. Honestly, I've not watched a lot of werewolf movies. I've seen like Silver Bullet, The Howling, the sequel to this, and I don't know. So to me, that's an interesting twist. It's like, okay, you got to end the the blood curse, and it gets passed along, because before the werewolf got shot, it scratched David. So David is being warned by Jack. Jack is saying, you have to kill yourself. You are the last werewolf. You have to kill yourself, and you have to do it soon, because it's going to be a full moon in 2 days. And at that point, you're going to turn into a werewolf, and you're going to start killing. And David's like, okay, I don't know what's real and what's not anymore. I don't know if I'm going crazy. I don't know if you're telling the truth. I don't know if you're really here. David gets discharged after a couple days. He didn't have a place to go. So Alex kind of has a little crush on him. He's kind of got a little crush on Alex. She says, well, you can stay with me. Because, basically, his little backpacking adventure, that's over. So she lets him stay with her in her apartment. And almost like as soon as she gets in, she hops in the shower. She's like, I'm going to take a shower. So it pans over. She's in the shower. All of a sudden, he's like behind her. They start getting it on. A little Van Morrison moon dance. One thing to be said about this movie, it's got a really cool and clever soundtrack, especially for 1981. A lot of movies had not focused on soundtracks much yet. I don't know, maybe that was always like a John Landis thing, because like Blues Brothers was like kind of a musical, and I don't know, but soundtracks didn't really get popular for another till halfway through the 80s, I don't think, especially in horror movies. It just wasn't I don't even think you could just go to the store and buy a soundtrack, but it had a lot of versions of Blue Moon, and it has Bad Moon Rising, and then it's got Moon Dance, songs with moon in the title, so it's kind of clever, because none of them are scary songs or anything, but they do create this mood to the movie throughout, and then you hear it's oh, moon. So they're in bed, they have sex. After they've had sex, they go to sleep. And David wakes up, because he has to go to the bathroom or something. He gets up, he goes in the bathroom, and for some reason, I don't know why, but he looks in the medicine cabinet. I don't know if he's just being nosy, he's got a headache, but he closes it, and there's Jack. A little greener, but Jack's back. And Jack's like, hey, buddy, and it scares the shit out of him. He's like, what are you doing here? He's like, because he was finally starting to feel normal again, and now Jack's back, and now Jack's in a different, he's out of the hospital. He's off the hospital drugs. Now he's at her house, and Jack's back again, and Jack's saying, hey man, it's tomorrow night. It's the night. If you don't kill yourself, you're going to turn into a werewolf. You have to kill yourself. There's no way around it. You're going to. You're going to go out there, and you're going to start killing people. You got to end it. Because Jack doesn't want to be among the undead walking around in limbo anymore. And he doesn't want more people to come along too. But if he's got dead people to talk to, who killed them? Because David hasn't killed anybody yet. And if David's the last one, Jack should be the only one. The next day, David's doctor pays a little visit to the slaughtered lamb. David's doctor, the more he listened to things that David had said, the more it just seemed kind of weird to him, and it kind of didn't make sense. And he thought, maybe there's something to this. So he drives to the slaughtered lamb, which is actually pretty far. It's kind of crazy that his hospital is the nearest one. And he goes in, it's all the same weird patrons, and they're all kind of looking at him funny, and he's like, well, I guess I'll have a drink. And he tries to slyly get some answers out of them. He brings up David, and they're all kind of like, well, don't know what you're talking about. Who? The kid? Here? No. And then the guy playing darts in the beginning, when there's a part in the beginning when Jack asks about the pentangle on the wall, and the guy shoots a dart, and he misses, and he turns around, he's like, you made me miss. I haven't missed 20 years, or whatever he says. But he gets up and creeps out. He's like, and he walks outside. And so then the doctor realizes he's not getting anywhere with these people, so he's like, all right. So he goes, he's getting in his car, and he looks over, and he sees the dark guy, and he's like, So he goes over to ask him, and the dark guy's like, this place is cursed. You got to get out of this place. That poor boy, starts to warn him. But then the other guy comes out, and he's like, that's enough. So before the doctor can get any like real information out of him, he's interrupted. But now the doctor's even more curious, like what is going on with this place? Maybe David is telling the. It's not like he thinks David is lying. He thinks that David is wrong. But now he's starting to think maybe David's right. But if David's right, that's crazy. Later that night, Alex goes to work, leaving David all alone. And David's sitting around the house, and all of a sudden he starts, after she's been gone for a little while, a couple hours after she leaves, I'm assuming it's a couple hours, a little while anyway, David just kind of starts freaking out. He's sitting in the chair, and he's like, ah! And it's like his skin is burning up, and he gets hot, and he just rips his shirt off, which is kind of weird. Like, if I was hot right now, and I tried to just rip this shirt off to the point where I couldn't wear it ever again because I just Hulk Hogan my way out of it, I couldn't do that. And I'm not like buff, but neither is David. But so I don't know if that was the beginning of his super werewolf strength. But he rips it off and strips off his clothes, and he's hot. He gets on the ground. Then all of a sudden he starts changing into a werewolf, and it's a long transformation, but it's really good. It's done by Rick Baker. And Rick Baker was on Joe Rogan's podcast not too long ago. I'll put a link to it at the bottom because it's really good. And they talk a lot about this movie. They talk about a lot of like his whole career and stuff. He said he had a weird career and a weird life, how he got into doing special effects and stuff. It's pretty good, but they talk a lot about this movie. There's a lot of really interesting stuff. If you like this movie, you'll love that podcast. So he transforms into the werewolf, and there's people. While he's transforming, there's people that get out of a cab that live in the apartment complex, and they start, instead of going into their apartment, because they've been out, they're a little tipsy, they go walking around to do something. But the part I don't get is he turns into a werewolf, and somehow he got out of the house, and like nothing's trash, and he doesn't have posable thumbs anymore. So I was like, how'd you get out of the apartment? But he kills them, and then he goes on a little killing spree. In the morning, he wakes up naked, and he's at the zoo. It's like in a wolf cage, but all the wolves are cool with him. They're just kind of like sniffing him. And he climbs out, but he's naked, and he's got a long way to go. Like, I have no idea how he knew how to get back to Alex's house, but he starts his little journey, and he's hiding behind a bush, and he sees a little kid with balloons.
Hey kid, little boy with the balloons. Come over here. If you come over here, I'll give you £1. 2 pounds.
If you come over here, I'll give you £1 is probably not the best thing for a naked adult to say to a little kid. David steals a coat and makes it back to Alex's. She's there. She's worried about him. She's like, where have you been? He's like, I don't know. I remember I locked myself out of the house and like got back in and then went back out. I don't know. I woke up. I think he even told her that he woke up at the zoo. She's like, why are you naked? And then she gets a call from the doctor because the doctor has just gotten a hold of like that day's newspaper and sees that like a lot of people got slaughtered like all over town. So he's like, uh-oh, because he's on to this like idea of David being a werewolf. So he called Alex. He's like, have you seen David? And she's like, yeah, he just got home. He's like, okay, stay there. Or actually, what he should have said was, stay there, I'm on my way. But instead he says, you and him need to come over to the hospital as soon as possible. So they hop in a cab, Alex and David. Hop into a cab. They start driving. The radio's on, and it's the news, and it's talking about all the dead bodies, or all the people that were killed in the night. And David realizes, like, I did it. Jack's right. It's like, he tells the cab driver to stop. And the cab driver does, and he runs out, and she's like, David, where are you going? She chases him, and he runs. He's like, and he sees a cop, and he's like, get away from me. You gotta get away from me. I'm not safe to be around. He runs over the cop. He's like, you have to arrest me. I killed all those people last night. The cop's like, what? And thinks he's like being a smart ass and like told him to go away, and then he starts saying all stuff trying to get arrested, but the cop won't arrest him. So he's like, which would have been a good thing for him to be locked up in a cell. He turns into a werewolf, he can't get out. I'm pretty sure he didn't have that kind of strength where he could just pull bars apart and bust out. But even if he did, he would have been around a bunch of armed cops who would have reason to believe that they might want to be ready for such an outbreak. They don't arrest him, and he starts running. He loses Alex. He says, I love you. Get away from me. Like, it's not safe, because he doesn't want to hurt her. So he takes off running. She can't keep up. He finds a payphone. He tries to call his family because he wants to say goodbye, because he's kind of realizing it's like, this is the end. Like, Jack's right. So he goes to the payphone, calls, only Jack's family is not there. It's just his little sister. It's like, maybe she's 10. He's like, you're home by yourself? But you're 10. I didn't get to hang out by myself when I was 10. And he says goodbye to her, and so he say goodbye to mom and dad and brother, and I love you and all that. And then he hangs up. And when he hangs up, he looks over. One thing I've never realized about this movie before is the pacing of it is like awesome. It's just, everything ties in. It's just beat, 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 beat. It's like they go there, they do this, they do this, they do this. There's no fat in this movie. It's just like, it's all trimmed down. It's just lean. You just go from this to there to there. There's no lulls where you're like, I'm gonna just fast forward through this part. As he gets off the phone, he looks over. There's Jack waving him down in front of a porn theater. So he walks down there to meet Jack, and Jack is not looking good at all. Like, he wasn't looking good the last 2 times either, but now it's like you can see the skulls peeking out. And so David walks over, and they're showing, it's a porno theater, and the name of the movie that they're watching, that they sit down to watch, is called See You Next Wednesday, which is not a real movie. It's a John Landis joke, and it goes, the only other example I can think is like in Thriller. That's when it caught my eye. I don't know if he does it in his other movies, but I researched it a long time ago, and he's like pretty notorious to working that line into all of his stuff. To the See You Next Wednesday, which originally was why I was going to start dropping this podcast on Wednesdays. I was going to end it by saying See You Next Wednesday, but somebody else already has a podcast called See You Next Wednesday, so it's not like a big mystery. It is kind of funny though. I like it when directors have little things like that they throw in, that you little Easter eggs, inside jokes. David and Jack are sitting in the theater. The movie's playing, and it keeps showing, like, they're talking. This part's actually kind of funny because, like, the movie's playing, they're talking, pretty serious conversations. Like, Jack, I'm sorry, you were right. I think I just went out and killed people last night. I don't know what to do. And then they look over, and there's the corpses that are also in limbo, like Jack, sitting in the theater next to him. They're like, well, you can kill yourself. All the while this is going on, it keeps flashing to the porn that's on. And the porn is actually funny if you watch it, because it's got this weird dialogue where a guy breaks in. He's like, hey, I told you not to do this ever again. And the guy's like, I don't know. I don't even know who you are. And the lady's like, I've never seen you before in my life. He's like, oh, whoops. But it totally looks like a scene. The porn, when they flash to it, it totally looks like one of the short bits from Kentucky Fried Movie, except it's a little more X-rated. But other than that, like, and I didn't realize that John Landis did that movie too until this time that I was watching it. But it totally looks like it's cut out from that movie. So meanwhile, they're talking. The other corpse is suggesting different ways that he can kill himself, and he realizes, like, that's what he's got to do. He just doesn't know how he's going to do it yet. A little later, he's still in the theater. Time has passed, and then all of a sudden, he starts turning into a werewolf again, but there's still people in the theater. And at first, one of the ushers comes over because he hears the sounds he's making, and he just assumes that he's, going for it right there all by himself. But then he finds out that he's not. He's actually turning into a werewolf, and he is the first victim. I don't know. He might be the only victim, because everybody makes a run for it. Everybody figures out real quick what's going on, and they get the fuck out. And he's in there, and then cops start showing up pretty quickly. The cops in this movie, for a horror movie, they're not bad. These are probably the best horror movie cops I've ever seen. even though there's a couple of them, we'll get to that in a second, who are kind of suspect. But overall, the cops did okay. So everybody scatters out. Cops show up. One of them starts to go in. He thinks the theater is empty. He goes in, and like that usher guy's on the ground, and there's a werewolf eating him. So he's like, "Whoa!" He bolts. He gets out of there. He goes out front, like puts the barricade down. I don't know what that barricade was. It was like a big door that they pulled down over the doors. He's telling everybody, he's like, "Get out of here! Get out of here!" And then David comes, Wolf David comes bursting through, and they're like, "Ah!" And he gets through all the way, and the two idiot cops that have been in the movie that I have not mentioned, they kind of show up, and one of them, first on the street to get killed, David just right on his neck and decapitates him. His head goes down there. Everybody freaks out. Everybody starts running. It's a busy city block. So there's cars, there's buses, everything's crashing into people and cars and everything. But David's not even trying not to get hit, but everything's missing him, and he like starts to make a run for it. Doctor and Alex have met up, and they're on their way to the scene. They hear like where it's going on, so they're like, "Oh, that must be David." So they hurry up and try and get there. David has kind of got himself stuck down an alley, and there's no way out. It's a dead end alley, and all the people, the mob are still like, they should be long gone by now, but they're still like, "Let's see what happens." And the cop is like, "Okay, everybody back." And there's cops with guns, and they're a good distance away. But Alex shows up, and she walks down, and she just kind of goes past everybody, and she's like, "David," and David like kind of stops, and he's like, and he's assessing it, and she's like trying to talk him down, but he's a wolf. And so David realizes this is how it has to go down. And there's the spoiler alert. I haven't said that. And David makes a move at her. The cops catch it. They gun him down and kill him. And she's just like horrified. And then she looks back down again. And David like slowly morphed into naked human David again with bullet holes in him. Suicide by cop. And then the movie ends. There's no badass award for this movie, because in this movie the victim and the villain are the same person. It's this inner demon inside of him, which is kind of, it's like the full moon is that bottle of whiskey for the alcoholic. The werewolf is the alcoholic, and when you combine the two, there's just chaos. And in the morning he wakes up naked in public with no recollection of what happened the night before, not sure what was real and what was imagined. It's not like when you watch The Howling, there's this feeling of it's the us against them. It's like we're the people being attacked by these werewolves. Because in The Howling, the werewolves are bad all the time. Like when they're werewolves, they're killing. And when they're people, they're still assholes. And this is kind of like the weird metaphor, the Jekyll and Mr. Hyde thing. Because when David's not a werewolf, he's a nice guy. But when he's a werewolf, he becomes a complete asshole and starts killing everybody. Which is kind of like a weird thing to think about. If you think about like what happened in your life, what was your werewolf bite? Because there's something in everybody's past, everybody got bit by a werewolf at some point, somehow. Not literally, obviously. But everybody's got a little something that happened to them, that bite that makes them turn into a werewolf, makes them turn into that asshole, makes them triggered by something. Maybe it is kind of a metaphor for mental illness. Just kind of like, what is that little thing that's happened to us all? If we could identify it, granted, obviously, if you really got bit by a werewolf, there's not really shit you can do about it. But in a way, maybe that's what makes David our badass. He figured out what was wrong with him, and he took care of the problem. Now that might sound like I'm pitching suicide. I'm not. I'm just saying he found a solution to his problem. That's not the solution to most people's problems. Unless you're turning into a werewolf, suicide is not the solution to your problem. But I don't know, this got weird. Anyways, that's it. So what did we learn? Survival tips. Stay on the road. Beware the moon. Don't fall in love with your patients.